Hey guys, so I'm just going to go through this Nearpod pretty quickly just so that you see what you have to do. There's activities embedded in this Nearpod that I want you to complete, and I'm just going to kind of read through the slides and explain a little bit the way I did with the live sessions, okay? This is preview mode, so I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like, but at least it'll give you an idea of what we talked about. So this basically what we're going to talk about today is plot. This Nearpod also includes conflict and antagonist and protagonist, but we're going to talk about those at the end of the week and then next week. So for plot is the main part of this, is the story. The main idea of a story is developed from the plot. Right? It's the most important element of a story because it is the story. It's the characters, it's the setting, it's a sequence of events, and it includes the moral of the story. This right here is called a plot diagram, and you'll see this. I'm sure you've seen it before, and you'll continue to see it. It gives you the 5 elements that make up plot. Okay? Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So the first thing that we need to know is that all stories have these 5 parts that make it a complete story. And if it's missing any of these elements, it's really not a complete story. Okay? These make up the plot. So again, it's exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Okay, and they're listed here in order: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The very first part of a story is the exposition. So when I look at this plot chart, what some people look and see a triangle, some people see a pyramid. I see a mountain, and I see a mountain that needs to be climbed. Right? So when I think about the exposition, this helps me to remember if I think about a mountain and I think about the exposition is the part of the story in which the setting, the characters, and the conflict are exposed. Exposition. They're exposed or introduced to the reader. So if I think about it like I'm climbing a mountain, there's things that I kind of have to know before I start my hike, correct? Like one thing I have to know is where I am, and that would be the setting. Okay, am I in a mountain in Russia? Am I in a mountain in Alaska? Am I climbing a mountain in Colorado? Am I climbing a mountain in Pennsylvania? Right? Where am I? So the setting goes in the exposition. It's one of the things I have to know before I start climbing my mountain. And when I'm reading a story or writing a story, one of the things that I have to set very clearly is the setting. Where is the story taking place? Right? Included in the setting is also the time of day or the season. So is this story taking place in the morning? Am I starting out in the morning to climb this mountain? Early in the morning? Am I starting around lunchtime? Am I going to try a nighttime climb and start climbing it in the evening? Right? And what season, time of year is it? Is it springtime? Is it the dead heat of summer? Is it the middle of winter? Am I going to be freezing? Is it the fall? All these things are important for me to know before I start my climb so that I know how to dress, right? I know what kinds of equipment I'm going to have to bring with me. So these are all important things in the exposition, the important things that I need to start to develop my story. The other thing that I also need to know is who's going with me, right? Who's going to climb up this mountain with me? Which characters am I bringing? Okay, am I bringing my brother? Am I bringing my little baby nieces and nephews? Am I bringing my daughter and my husband? Am I bringing friends? Who's going up this mountain? Who's going to take this climb with me? So that's the exposition. In Flipped, the exposition is that Flipped takes place in a suburban town, much like the developments that we have in Washington Township. The main characters are Bryce and Juliana. They live across the street from each other, and the story starts when they're in 2nd grade and continues through 8th grade. That's the basic exposition of the story, the things that we learn in the very beginning of the story as we're starting our climb. Okay, so now you have an activity, and I know that it's really hard for you to see this, and I apologize for that. But as you're doing it on your own, maybe it'll be easier to see the elements. All you're doing for this activity is answering this question: which plot element exposes the setting, characters, time, etc. Right? And you're using that text box. You can type. You can use the text box feature. You can write the answer in, or some lazy kids, some kids even just drew an arrow from the right answer up here. Okay, so whatever of these words that's down here, I can't see them in this preview, but you will see them when you click on it. Whichever word I said goes into this first point. Okay, that's all you're doing. One word in this part, because we're going to add a word each time we go. Right, so now we're talking about the rising action. And when you think about rising, right, you know rising means to go up or to lift up. So when I'm thinking about climbing up the mountain, I'm thinking about the rising action. The rising action is me getting from my exposition, from my setting, from having all my friends accumulated. Now I'm going to start climbing that mountain. This is going to be the longest part of the story. And if you think about it, when you're climbing something like this, it does seem to take a lot longer to climb a mountain than it does to go down the mountain. Seems like it always takes a lot longer to get somewhere than it takes to get home. Doesn't really, but it always feels that way. Right, so this is the longest part. This is the part where the characters work through the problems and the events. Right, we try to solve our problems. As we're climbing our mountain, we're going to encounter problems. Right, there might be a part where I can't get a grip. There might be a part where I start to fall and I need help from one of the other characters or one of my friends rising up this mountain, climbing up this mountain with me. Right, complications are going to arise. And those complications can sometimes create suspense, right? So if I'm climbing up the mountain and I lose my footing and I start to fall, it may be suspenseful for a minute before anybody realizes whether or not I'm appropriately tethered to the mountain, right? And I'm not going to fall all the way down. I might just fall a couple feet. Okay, so that's all in the rising action, anything like that happens, right? Now your activity again, now you're going to add two parts. We know climax we know that exposition went here, and now we are going to add this next part, okay, which is rising action. I'm telling you this, but when you do it, I'm not going to tell you the answers because I won't be talking to you, okay? All right, the next part is the climax. The climax is the highest point of interest in the story, and it's the turning point in the story, right? One or more conflicts are resolved during this climax part. So now I've had my exposition, right? My setting, my characters. We've started that climb up the mountain. We've encountered all kinds of problems, and we finally solved most of the problems that we face, and we get to the top of this mountain. That's the climax. It's the highest point in this chart. It's the highest point in a mountain. It's the highest point of interest in a story, the climax. Okay? It's also the turning point, and that makes sense too if you think about the fact that I've been on an uphill battle at this point, and now I'm literally going to turn and go down, right? A literal turning point where I'm going down now the mountain. Okay, so when I'm at the top of the mountain, Juliana overhears Bryce and his friend Garrett in the library, right? That's a turning point, a huge turning point and flipped. She hears them talking and she hears them making fun of her uncle. And she starts to think of Bryce in a different way from that point forward. She starts to see him differently, right? She starts to think that maybe he's not the boy that she thought he was after all. Okay, maybe he's not worthy of that first kiss, remember? Okay, so that's the climax, that highest point. And again, we have our activity. So now you'll add 3, right? You'll answer 3 questions. You'll answer the setting and the characters, the important part of the story that works through the problems, and then the turning point of the story at the very top, okay? You're just going to fill in those 3 in this slide. Now we move on to the falling action, and this should be easy, right? It should be easy to remember. The rising action is when you're going up, and the falling action is when you're going down, because most of us fall down. The falling action shows what happens to the characters after the climax. and after that main conflict is resolved, right? So the main conflict is resolved, and then the falling action. There's the climax and then the falling action. And in our story, Juliana stops paying attention to Bryce, right? He realizes he misses her. He realizes he'd been mean to her. He regrets it. He realizes that he likes her more than he thought he did. And he tries to kiss her. He goes as far as to try and kiss her in front of their classmates. So during the falling action, there are still going to be some little hiccups that arise. Maybe some problems happen, but they're not anything major like what's happening in the rising action up to the climax, right? These are the little events that happen after the fallout from after the main turning point of the story, right? What kinds of things happen before we can get some kind of clear ending. Again, the activity. So now you have the which plot element exposes the setting, which plot element tells most of the story and works through the conflict, which is the turning point of the story, and which shows what happens after the climax, right, on the way down the mountain. You're just going to put those 4 in your little chart. And the last part of the story, the last element, is the resolution. The resolution is where the final outcome of the story is revealed, right? It's the resolution. It's revealed, the resolution. Okay, everything is resolved down here. So Juliana can't, doesn't want anything to do with Bryce, okay? But he knows that he has to do something to apologize. He feels really bad about everything, and he knows he has to do something. So he makes a grand gesture to show her how much he cares, to prove to her that he's changed and that he realizes kind of what a jerk he's been, okay? And we know, what is that grand gesture? Everybody say it with me together. He plants her a tree, okay? He plants a tree for her. That's his grand gesture to show her that he's serious. He means business, okay? All right, so now we have our exposition. I'm at the bottom of this mountain. I'm getting ready to climb. I'm all excited. I got my characters. My friends are with me, right? I got all my peeps, and I got all my equipment, and I know where I am. I know what time of day it is. I start getting up that mountain, and I run into some problems. Things I didn't anticipate, things that add some suspense. Some of my friends are, maybe thinking they're going to have to drop out of this. They're not going to make it. Right? Other friends have to help other friends. We have to figure out things together. We work together. We try and solve the problems. We get to that climax and we take a deep breath. This is a turning point. We're looking at this beautiful scenery out in front of us now from the top of that mountain, right? It's the highest point in our story, in our climb, in our adventure. And now we've got the main problems are all solved. And so now we're going to take easy peasy. We're going to be on easy street, and we're going to fall down that mountain. We're going to tumble down. We're going to roll down. We're going to slide down that mountain. Our falling action, right? Are we going to, maybe we hit a bump or two on the way down, right? Maybe a rock sticking out that we kind of bang into. But nothing major, nothing that we can't overcome easily. And then we finally get to that resolution, that final part of the story where we've climbed the mountain and we've lived to tell about it, and all my friends have made it through this adventure with me, and we are going to go happily and live happily ever after. Okay, the resolution of our story. And that brings us to our last slide, and now you're just going to add that final part. You're going to start with the beginning of the story, the setting. You're going to hit the part that tells most about the story and works through the problems, then the turning point of the story, then what happens after the climax of the story, and then how everything ends up. The final things are all resolved, right? All the problems are resolved. The final story is resolved. Okay. The next slide is where we talk about conflict. We're going to go through that together at the end of this week. All right, so I just want you to go through this video and finish up to these slides on my teacher page, all right, on my Schoology page. All right, guys, I'll see you all, and every one of you, I hope you log in again on Friday. And maybe tomorrow, if you need anything, I'll be here Wednesday. I would like you all to check in just to make sure that I know that you're on track, all right? Okay.